Hello, everyone out there. This is Tom Hatzis with the Psanctum Oddcast, here with co-counsel Keith Grevenitz for the
Hey.
What's that?
Oh, I just said hey.
Oh, I was like, tell me I pronounced it wrong. Keith Grevenitz, co-counsel, and our good friend, Pod Dammit, as he goes by, or Sean. What would you prefer today, sir?
Call me Sean today, please.
Sean it is. So welcome, Sean, to our Oddcast. And we do have a very special day today. It is Keith's acidversary. He took acid 12 years ago today. And so happy acidversary to Keith.
Thank you. That was a good thing that Facebook did to remind me. So there's one plus for Facebook there.
Right? Well, it has one other positive thing it does, which is it'll kick me off for 30 days or so. If I say something honest, which is I actually love that it does that, because the first time I did that, or the first time they kicked me off for 30 days, I was like, holy shit, this is awesome. And it's like, I haven't had that need to be on it after that happened. It was like a year ago or so, just about. Yeah. But anyway,
I'm actually currently banned.
Oh yeah?
I'm currently banned. Yeah. It is good.
What did you do to earn the ban?
Yeah, what'd you do?
You know what? I've earned bans several times. One time I posted a Chris Farley meme where he says "kill Whitey." You remember that one?
Yeah, from from Black Sheep. Yeah, I was gonna say the one that takes place right in Washington. I forgot what it was called, but yeah.
Yeah, I got banned for that one, and then when I got out of that ban, someone said, "Why did you get banned?" I said, "I posted this," and then I got banned again.
So one of the reasons why I'm happy to have Sean on as our first guest is that one of the things Sean did was create what I believe that you called entheogenic, the shamanic cabaret. Which
That's the concept, yep.
Yeah, which takes a person through the hero's journey. You know what? Why don't I let you kind of let's start from there, and we'll kind of riff off that.
All right. I have a ritual way of working with psilocybin, and that you can do it privately or publicly. And the public-facing version of it is called an entheogenic, and an entheogenic is a theatrical spectacle specifically designed to create in its audience an apprehension of the divine. And you can think about it as a sort of a return of mystery religions, but sort of grafted into modern times, right? So it basically takes the nightclub experience, the concert experience, and turns it into a magic ritual that people can participate in.
Yeah, I've actually participated in one of the live ones. It's kind of incredible. And I didn't think that I would have the stamina to keep going through it. But the good news about mushrooms, stamina. But yeah.
Awesome. So how did you get involved participating? What do you do in that, Tom?
Oh, I was just dancing. I participated because I have a lot of love and respect for Sean and what he's doing, and I wanted to give it a try. And truth be told, it's not the way I prefer to take my mushrooms. I have my altar de Gaia here, and I do my own thing. And I usually just like to sit with the medicine. I don't really like anyone else to be around. I mean, Eden will sit with me just for the come up, because that could be a little shaky sometimes, as I'm sure you both know. And so my partner will sit with me for the first, 45 minutes, just as it's coming up. But once I break through and I'm in Gaia's palace, it's all ecstasy from there. So I'm fine. And then she goes off and does whatever she wants at that point.
My mother really wants to do like a mushrooms or an LSD with me. And that's been my thing too. I'm like, how will I tell my mom, hey mom, I just got to be by myself right now. You know what I mean? Because I would love to do it with her. She's an amazing person. She tried DMT. She's 64. She tried DMT the first time last year. And I was a little nervous because of her advanced age, if you will. And then she took her hits. She took 3 hits like a champ. And then I saw her, she was smiling and like reaching up. She was laying down and just, I cried a little watching my mom hit this DMT. It was a beautiful thing. But, and I love that. about her and for her, and I'm just having myself think like, can I do 12 hours? You know what I mean? Same thing. I've come to want to be by myself a little too.
Sure.
It's interesting to me that so many people that I've tried to explain the concept to are so introverted in the way they prefer to use the medicine, because the models are there for a group ritual in terms of like Grateful Dead shows or Fish shows or raves and stuff like that. You know, really, the concept is like spirituality, the way I would define it for this, is about your relationship to the divine, and religion is about your ability to gather with other people and create an experience of the divine that's way more powerful than anything you could just do by yourself. And so that's really what that thing is about, is to try to provide a context for people to come together and engage in ritual action in order to create a powerful experience.
Sure. Yeah, that's known as among historical mysticism. I believe that's called a monistic mystical experience, which is group participation. So I agree with you totally that is. I mean, again, I'd said, you know, the rites of Eleusis work that way, and for all we know, the rites of Mithra work that way. You know, any number of ancient mystery traditions were all group ceremonies, and also in the Americas as well. I think, maybe I'm wrong about that. Maybe one of you knows better than I do. In Mesoamerica, were they restricted to the priests or were they given to people? I'm sure somebody out there will correct me in a mean way in the comments.
I would ask Tom.
What's that?
If I had to know the answer to that question, I would ask you, Tom.
I normally, you know, I stick mostly with the Western European experience in history. I don't know too much about what was going on here. You know, I know, you know, a little bit, the kind of stuff that anybody who's read, you know, Wasson would know, but not too much more than that.
I think you can thread the needle in that you can provide a context for people to work together, to have experiences collectively, and yet at the same time, they can have their own individual experience. If anything has been disheartening to me in the last few years of doing this work, is realizing what a sort of psychedelic Tower of Babel we're all living in, where everybody is having these intensely personal experiences, and yet none of them really align. So it's difficult. We're going to have to work very hard in order to evolve a model that can account for all of our experiences. But I think that's necessary if we're going to start to understand this stuff.
I agree. And it's like one of the reasons why I wanted to speak to you specifically, Sean, is that you and I are both goddess worshipers. I think we're, you know, two of very few, unfortunately. My twin brother is another one that I know. But besides the three of us, I don't really know too many, at least within the psychedelic renaissance, that are like actively putting things out there, writing books as you've done, that are into this. And yet, according to Eden, who's both familiar with my practice and your practice, our ideas of this goddess are very different. And so that, I think that is such, there's just an avenue worth exploring. Like what in your, because I've been wanting to ask you this for a while, but I saved it for this particular podcast. I was like, so many times I wanted to call you, I'm like, what do you think about this? Like, no, wait, you know, what is that goddess experience like for you? I know that's a big, you know, open-ended kind of question.
Yeah.
But what is like, I mean, does she appear in a human form or like, because I've seen Gaia in like her natural form, and it's like, I couldn't possibly describe her to anybody. Like I couldn't describe what she looks like to you. So I'm curious what your...
Keith, do you want to go first? Do you have any...
This is you guys. I was going to ask. I said I want to hear you guys talk about. You know,
here's my response, Tom. She can appear spontaneously in a thoroughly unexpected form, or you can prepare a vessel for her in your imagination that she will fill.
Sure.
A couple, and so I've and it really depends on sort of the, I hate that word frequency, but the type of goddess energy. So Keith, what I do, right, is I sing and dance along to popular music in order to put myself into specific kinds of visionary trance. And
can you give examples of the popular music?
Sure, exactly. So the second major part of the ceremony is the first major part is super rock and super masculine, right? The second major part is really feminine and uses all this dance pop music. And one of the songs that I use is Umbrella by Rihanna. And so when you sing and dance along to that song, and you're in a deep, like, and you've had the experience of breaking through into what I call belief space, you actually will start to, the idea is that you get yourself into a state of heightened emotion. And that song is about a sort of is about devotion, right? When you listen to the lyrics, you are hearing a woman sing a song of devotion to somebody. And if you listen to the lyrics in just the right way, it's almost like it picks up this carrier wave where it becomes the mother goddess singing to you. And when you pick it up like that, all of a sudden your head will fill with visions of the world tree, or once I saw this vast sort of, like, the earth is this vast sort of egg shape, dappled with continents and oceans like spilling over the side and everything. And it's like she can come in all kinds of different ways, but that specific earth mother Gaia energy comes with that song. And
that's
but by
amazing.
contrast, another song that I use is it's called it's by Robin, Dancing on My Own. And in that one, the goddess presents as she who is not there, which is an absence in space in the shape of a young woman that has like all the attraction of a black hole. You know what I mean? And it's like the absence of that, but it's still goddess energy, but it presents in this sort of in this different way.
So you're trying to create that. You're trying to evoke this energy then, and as Tom said that in the Entheogens and God group, and I'm in all these other groups, and which basically I want to hear what other people are experiencing, see if anyone has the same experiences as I do, etc. And a lot of times the argument comes up, do you listen to music or do you not? Do you just do, and you got the people who are like, oh, McKenna says, dark silence, and then they'll almost get mad at people, and they'll be like, no, you're not doing it right if you're listening to music. And I personally have done both. And I think, yeah, sure. There's art and music. It's music is nature in some way, So I think that a stimuli or during your experience can be a very powerful thing, and it seems like you seem to lean on that.
And what's specifically what it's about, it's rather than making it a passive experience, it's an entirely active experience. You basically bend the power of the mushroom to your will in order to do magical workings and invoke different aspects of the divine in a specific sequence, and you doing sort of specific visualization exercises along the way. So
yeah. So if I could ask, what you don't like the word frequency?
Frequency works. I mean, it's the best. It only because it smacks of the woo woo, right? When we talk about, but in some ways, words like frequency and vibration and stuff, right? That's the best that we can do with our conceptual language. I often think about it. I think about, there are mystics around the world who talk about the divine as a white light that is love, right? They talk about seeing the white light, right? And if you hold up a prism to white light, it diffuses all the different bands of visible color, right? And so to me, you can basically extract any emotional frequency from love and experience them at a divine level. And that's effectively what archetypes are. Archetypes are frequencies of the divine, frequencies of light, of emotional light, I guess you could say.
Have you ever tried listening to, they have these for lack of better words, they have these frequencies, like tune into 932 and what do you think about any of those?
Tom, you want to go with that first, Tom?
So I know what, Keith, I know what you're talking about. I've never, pretty much what I'll do is I'll just put on some very gentle and nice music, very much the opposite of what Sean does, because there's a lot of rock and roll there. And I love rock and roll. I play music. I played in bands my whole life. I played in death metal bands, but when I'm on mushrooms, I don't want to hear Corpse Grinder from Cannibal Corpse going fucked her with a knife, I don't, it's just, now whereas, what's that?
Tool would be too much for me. I'd be like, oh man, this is a little heavy.
Yeah, it's beautiful, but it's a little heavy. Now, Sean, it seems like he kind of like, and I don't want to speak for you, but you seem to welcome that. Like you really like.
Fuck yeah. Tool, 46 and 2, the Tool song 46 and Tool is an incredible vehicle for exploring your shadow self. Because not only is the song, the lyrics of this, I mean, the song itself sort of really heavy and sort of uncanny and has that sort of sense of dread about it. The lyrics are about the encounter with the Jungian shadow. And so if you sing those lyrics while in a medicine state, you will have an encounter, a direct encounter with your shadow. You effectively put yourself in a spell. And so when I talk about frequencies, I really think that cymatics that psychedelics can affect consciousness in two ways, cymatically, and I should say sound will affect you in two ways while you're under the influence of psychedelics, cymatically and effectively. And cymatics refers, of course, to the visual representation of vibratory patterns. So listening to a single tone would be like, or like listening to a drum or listening to a singing bowl or a didgeridoo. That'll affect your consciousness in certain ways and trigger visionary effects. But what I'm all about is trying to put myself into heightened states of emotion, and then really what I think ends up happening is that at a certain point, you are no longer experiencing your personal emotion, but the transpersonal aspect of that emotion. You experience the emotion at the level that God does. And then that's what triggers basically an experience of gnosis.
Sure. Plus that bass line is killer.
That bass line is killer.
Bass line is killer. And it's a great song.
It's an amazing song.
Yeah.
But that's the thing. You have to, those aspects of like savagery and aggression and stuff like that, those are shadow aspects that are not commonly touched on in psychedelic experience. Like, people go to raves and it's like, whoa, and they feel all that thing. But that's just like only paying attention to like 5K across the equalizer band. You know what I mean? Like you need to have that full spectrum. And if you want to, one of the things you can do with psychedelics is delve into the darkest parts of yourself, because your ability to experience the abyss is going to be directly proportional to your ability to access exaltation and joy.
That's a really good way of putting it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of people do ignore that.
Yeah.
What was that, Keith?
I thought a lot of people do ignore that, but then again, I mean, there's a full spectrum of people using psychedelics. Some people are just like, I want to see pretty colors, and they don't put any meaning behind it, or I think everything I see in there is real.
Yeah. So why don't you, Keith, will you tell us a little bit about some of your most, maybe tell us about one of your most noteworthy experiences?
Okay. I actually, I got a friend gifted me a DMT cartridge, and a lot of people talk about those too, and they're like, oh, I can't blast off, whatever, I can't get it, but I definitely did, and I think it was very jungly. It was like the cartridge itself was dark, and I've had them in there, they've been lighter, but anyway, I was like, I'm gonna hunker down, and I got in my bed. I put on the frequency, okay, and it was 9:32 or whatever, and I was about 3 experiences in, and everything was black in my DMT experience. I was like, oh no, did I overdo it or something? I'm kicked out or whatever, and then a golden Merkaba appeared before me, and I didn't know what one was at the time. So I see it, and it's made of gold. It's not like the color gold. It's made of gold, and you have. I thought of it at the time as like a 3-dimensional Star of David. Mm-hmm. And so I'm asking myself these questions as I'm in this kind of sober state watching this, and I said, wow, is like the Jewish concept of God, the one or something? That was my first thought. And I'm watching it, and it's inverted tetrahedrons, and one spinning clockwise, one spinning counterclockwise, which I did a bunch of research after that and found out that's how it operates. And this is actually the main reason why I give so much credence to psychedelics, is because I learned about something I didn't previously know about. Right. Which I think is Tom said also. He had a similar experience where he saw something that he didn't know of, and then
I've just
than
been
he learned about.
I've just been rereading Velas by Philip K. Dick, and he specifically says that that's how he would judge whether a theophany was authentic or not. If did it give you information that you could not have accessed otherwise?
Yeah. And Keith,
Yeah. So
oh,
I'm sorry. What were you saying, Tom?
oh no, go for it. Finish what you're saying.
So this thing's spinning, and I'm in complete awe, and I couldn't be in any more awe, I thought. And then this giant robed being appeared before me. I didn't see his face. I don't know if it was out of like some kind of respect or fear I had, but I didn't like look at his face. And he was giant and emanating purple light off of him. And he didn't say anything to me, which in hindsight, I wish I voiced something to him. And so I'm going to try to rush through this because I just have a couple more things to say about it. But, you know, when DMT ends, it's over, and you know it's over, right? So I was like, all right, it's done. I sat up in my bed, and I was thinking about it. Wow, this is incredible, etc. And then my bedroom changed colors to like a violet reddish hue. And then my body went through a state of ecstasy unlike I've ever felt. It was like every limb was coming, like my face, you know, like it was like full orgasm body. And it was, you know, all I could do was say, thank you. And then it like officially ended after that. And so that I was completely blown away. And I'd come to find out, because I told this story in the Entheogenic and God group, and I invited I'd call him like a mentor. He's an amazing guy. He's a meditator, and he goes to places like he tells me anyway, he goes to places like psychedelic realms when he's meditating. And he said that he had about the same experience as me, except he spoke to these guys and he said, you were in a daze because you were in a drug, and I was meditating, so I was able to communicate with them. So maybe he's right, maybe he's not, I don't know, but
no, it just takes practice. That's all, to maintain that level of lucidity.
I gotta be honest, I don't believe anybody when they say that. I know maybe I'm wrong, but whenever somebody says to me that they can achieve the places that I get on mushrooms or DMT or ayahuasca, that they could do that, like I don't believe them. I just don't.
I'm a little skeptical myself.
I'm very skeptical of that, because your brain, so you're just like, it would be like saying that sitting here as I am, I can just get my heart rate up as if I was jogging. No, I can't, because when I'm sitting down and when I'm jogging, my physiology is doing two different things. When you see a brain, and they've done brain scans, somebody meditating or not even meditating, somebody on psychedelic, you know, like LSD or something, there are completely different things going on in your brain. So I'm very skeptical, like Sean, whenever somebody says that. You could definitely get to some very interesting places through meditation, and I certainly have, but to confuse that meditative state with, you know, drinking a large dose of ayahuasca I think is ridiculous. Just maybe people.
Well, as McKenna said, nobody ever walks into the ashram with their knees knocking. You know what I mean? It's like, this stuff is really, really, really hard to do, and to get to these places, right? Like if somebody makes a claim, like there's a guy on YouTube, what's his name, Sadhguru or somebody like that, who was just making a claim that he had passed into a meditative state and he spent 13 days in absorption, and like he came to with like villagers crowded around him and wearing, you know, like garlands of flowers. And I was like, and I usually refrain from making snarky comments, but I just said, do it in a lab or it didn't happen. You know what I mean? Like, seriously, if you say you can do it, then by all means go into a lab. Because Keith, I got to tell you, man, I am really gratified to hear that what you just said about that ecstatic state. I actually have coined a term for it. I call it an enthusiasm, from the words enthusiasm and orgasm, right? Because enthusiasm originally means possessed by a god. And it's so good for me to hear you say that, because that is something that I can't say that I do it all the time, but it happens pretty regularly. And it's like absolutely astonishing to when you catch that state and you feel like you're being just torn apart at a molecular level by some kind of force that's passing through you. And I don't hear enough. I really haven't heard. I mean, Tom, I imagine you probably get into states like that too, but I really, in the larger psychedelic community, I've never heard anybody else talking about that.
And I mean,
that changed my life. I actually, I can show you. I had an artwork done, a sculpture of the guy.
Oh, nice. Awesome. Yeah, that's awesome.
So then he's got the Merkaba up there.
Yeah.
Wow. I love it.
No, it's like you're fishing for mystics.
That's rad, dude. That's so good.
Dude, that's amazing.
Yeah, that reminds me of a vision I had of the horned one once, quite spontaneously. And he was just hovering in the air there, like a lot like that, except
the horned one. Tell me. I kind of want to go into this.
Yeah, me too.
Well, that in many traditions of goddess worship, she has a consort who is also her son, right? And he's often depicted as having horns. And so quite spontaneously, without looking for it all, this guy started showing up in my visionary work. And one of the fun things about working with rock music in this context is, you get all kinds of funny ideas doing this stuff, right? Like among other things, the divine is kind of an idea machine. And so I started to get this idea that rock and roll has always been sort of criticized as being the devil's music. But I started to think of, what if rock music was actually created by the great god Pan himself to create a sound that would be appropriate for his return to popular consciousness, pandemonium, you know what I mean? And so when you listen to rock music, like, it's that energy that you are trying to get to, which is basically, it ties into, I mean, this happened real spontaneously. It started for me several years ago when I was working with an Audio Slave song called Show Me How to Live. And I had this vision of a reclining human figure with bull's horns who was the size of a mountain range, and just sort of regarding me. And it was sort of connected in a way I couldn't understand to like an Egyptian kind of mythology. But that bull god energy seems to be one of the great driving forces behind certain strains of rock music. Again, it's a completely subjective opinion, but every once in a while, that first section of my ritual, the stereo myth, all the rock stuff, is specifically about calling him in and using that energy to transform yourself and get him to basically like ride you, almost like a voodoo ceremony. You know what I mean? You're trying to get that energy to come in and take over for a bit.
You call, if I remember correctly, cock god swagger or rock god swag. What did you call it again?
Cock rock swagger.
Oh yeah. Yeah, cock rock swagger.
Yeah, but that's what it is. Like when you listen to a song like "Flower" by Soundgarden, it's right there. You know what I mean? Like this fucking immense power and of masculine sexual energy, which is accessible to us in our consciousness. That transpersonal energy, you can get it and you can ride it.
So I just wanted to bring some
music. I like normal music. Yeah.
What's that?
I like your realm of music. You must be like from grew up in the 90s. Or something.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm actually convinced that there was sort of a one-time special event between like 1955 and 1995. There was an eruption of spirit into Western popular culture and consciousness, and that's reflected in that music. And that music, not all music has, I mean, it's going to be different for everybody, right? But not all music is, so the term I use for this work is phonomancy, meaning divination via sound, Keith. And some songs are more fundamentally effective than others. And it has a lot to do with, your personal sort of energetic structure and what you like and stuff like that. But even then, some songs are better for it than others. And so, yeah, those songs are particularly good.
And how else do we explain, was it 1992 when Use Your Illusion came out from Guns N' Roses, Pearl Jam 10, Nirvana Nevermind, Soundgarden Bad Motorfinger, Red Hot Chili Peppers, Blood Sugars, all in one year, like 5 or 6 of like the greatest records of the modern day came out.
Yeah.
So I never forget about that. From 1955 to 1995, there was like musically, there was that energetic kind of, I don't know.
I mean, almost every year you can look back at like 69, 70, 71, and every month there was another like unbelievable showstopper of a record, Joni Mitchell, and then Al Green, and then Jimi Hendrix, you know what I mean? Like one after the other. So I always think about this stuff from the perspective of the 23rd century, and they're looking back at this time. Or you can think about that movie 12 Monkeys, where Bruce Willis comes back and he carjacks this woman, right? And then he puts on the radio and Blueberry Hill comes on and he starts crying and he's like, you have no idea what you have right now. You know, like in the future, things might get so sterile and dead that we will look back at that and just be like, wow. So,
hey, do you guys mind if I backtrack a little? Because you were talking about the shadow self and encountering these dark type of entities. And you when you talk about it, it doesn't seem like you have any fear there. Oh, that's wrong.
Oh my God.
I'm scared, dude.
Dude, this shit almost killed me last summer. I almost died. It was.
I almost died too.
You almost died too? That's awesome.
Yeah, last summer, dude. Last summer.
I got fucking stopped in my tracks in 3 separate ceremonies by something that basically was like effectively like an archon. You know what I mean? And it crushed my spirit. It was utterly humiliating and it was terrifying and an absolutely like miserable experience that
Tell me about it. Can you tell me about it?
Yeah, please.
Yeah. So one of the reasons why I followed rock music in my ceremony is it's always been an anxious, as Tom, you were saying, right? That come on is always a kind of an anxious kind of thing. Oh, yeah. And the aggression of rock music gave me the sort of the spirit to work through that, right? And then, but at a certain point, there'd be a breakthrough and you would be in belief space. Like you would transcend your normal sort of mortal identification and you become what I regard as my shamanic superhero self. And in that state, I am fully subjectively experiencing myself doing magic and spirits are real and the goddess is real. And I'm talking to I'm having visions of the afterlife and punching way, way, way fucking deep to the real, like the causal levels of reality, you know? But it started to get harder and harder. And eventually I started to get these images of the things that were standing against me. I mean, I have a friend who's an ayahuasquero and he would tell me about seeing. That's what he did. Like he would go into visionary states and people would sit in front of him and he would see what was afflicting them. And I started getting images of this great sort of stone idol, almost like a Toltec statue head, you know what I mean? And all kinds of other gnarly shit. And it would just actively suppress the visionary effects of the medicine and inflict panic on me, straight up panic attacks while I was in the medicine state. And basically I'd be panicking from the neck down.
Did you think you were having a heart attack?
What's that?
Did you think you were having a heart attack, maybe?
No, I just thought I knew what was happening, but I just knew that I was in absolute misery and was committed to but I was also on 10 grams of mushrooms plus a 3-gram extract of Syrian rue plus a couple hits of pot. So I was on the verge of an absolute psychedelic catastrophe. And I had to talk myself through it the entire way for 4 hours straight. You know what I mean? Like, you're going to be all right. You're going to be okay. Get back up, dance again. Keep going. Don't let it stop you. But eventually, over the course of a few more ceremonies, it got so bad that I just had to stop. And like I regard this, I happen to believe that there is a force built in this level of reality that is designed to absolutely defeat human creativity. And it's basically almost like it wants to drive you into alienation and despair and get you to kill yourself. And people have mythologized it as the devil. You can call it whatever you want, but it's real. And when you do a lot of this work, you make yourself vulnerable to it, right? And so it basically it strips all the meaning out of what you're doing and leaves you with nothing but desolation, you know? And then when that carries over into your everyday life, then you're just fucked.
See, it's like I've never, like, once, I don't know what, and this is why I'm so, excited to talk to you about this, because with me, like, Gaia never shows me that stuff. Like, I've never had a quote unquote bad trip. And I don't mean like, oh, it was just a rough experience, because I don't like when people say that, because I find it dismissive. There are bad trips. Like, people have bad trips, and to just say, oh no, it was just a rough ride. No, it was a bad fucking trip. But I've never had one. I don't even know what that feels like.
Wow.
And I've tried to induce one. In fact, Gaia tried to induce one when I was in that space. And actually 2 times. The second time I did ayahuasca, she put on this like demon face and was like all up in my shit. And I was like, no, I trust you. I know that you're just testing me to see if I trust you. And she's like, well, fuck it. This isn't fun. Let's go explore the cosmos. And then we were off. But, you know, it's like I've literally had her try to like induce it. And then another time when I was on mushrooms, I don't remember how much because I never count, but a high dose of mushrooms. And just kept putting these different masks over my face. And with each mask, I was seeing the world through somebody that lived in poverty or somebody that was in a war-torn area or something. And it was like really disheartening, but it didn't spiral my experience into like a hell realm or anything. It was like, oh, like I got to empathize with those, you know, people that experience those kinds of things. Like it's just, but that's the most it's ever been, but it's never been like, I've never had a bad trip. I don't know what that's like. I almost did the third time I did ayahuasca. I almost had a bad trip, but it wasn't. I don't know.
Well, I know, like, you can have a bad trip, but it could also be good too. You know, there's a lot of people say that, but I had a similar experience where I went into almost a state of a full panic attack, and I was at a rave. And so I was around a bunch of music and a bunch of people. And then I was like, all right, let me go walk off. And it was like a camp out rave. So, and I have got my dog with me, and I'm like, all right, let me go walk off and look at the stars. They're beautiful stars in the middle of the central Arizona forest. And I'm going into this panic attack. So I have in my truck, I have it set up like to camp, and I have like a bed in the back of it. And I'm in the back with my dog, and it's getting really harsh. And this hand comes through into the reality. And mind you, I was on mushrooms, but not a lot. So the fact that I was having this kind of experience was a little startling anyway, because I ate like 2 grams of mushrooms. And literally this hand is coming into the fabric of my reality. And I was having like a panic attack that was a physical panic attack. I wasn't actually in a state of panic. And it was pointing at my chest because I felt like, I was like, oh no, am I having a heart attack? And it's pointing at my chest and like laughing. And then the hand goes over to my dog. And I'm like, don't you fucking touch my dog. And it's the funny thing was though too, because I was like, oh man, I don't want anyone to hear me say, don't you fucking touch my dog, to nobody, essentially. So I was like a little bit like, that'd be embarrassing if someone's walking by. They'd be like, are you okay over there? No, please leave me alone. Let me deal with this myself. But I said, don't you fucking touch my dog. And it was pointing at my chest and then making all these this imagery of like, here, take my hand and I'll save you. And I said no. I said no to this hand because it basically was offering me a deal.
Yeah.
And so I'm scared. I gotta tell you, even I especially in terms of going into something like a mushroom trip, 6 to 8 hours, acid. I'm a little scared right now. Mm-hmm. I've had a bunch of dark experiences that are the scariest thing you'll ever be scared by in your life.
Yep. Yeah. So there's a couple things I'd like to say about that. One is, this is a perfect example of the necessity we have of evolving a shamanic culture of our own, right? So I don't have an explanation, Tom, of why that has never happened. This has never happened to you. I say, God bless you, and I hope it never does. And Keith, I'm sorry to hear about that, right?
I think it's done amazing things for me. It's made me believe in things in a greater sense, and believe in God and everything.
All we can do is come up with stories that we can tell ourselves about this stuff, and if it makes sense and helps you process it, then you can do that, right? So mine right now is that I am basically in a training matrix, and certain experiences are being allowed, or certain forces are allowed to attack me by the higher aspects of myself, because they are trying to shape and groom my character a certain way. One idea that came in one of those terrible ceremonies was I saw myself wrestling with this faceless opponent in a kind of like martial arts gym, and it was implacable. utterly bent on my destruction. And it was communicated to me that I needed to get so strong that I could hold him down with one hand and conduct a symphony with the other. And at the time, that seemed utterly impossible. But now I'm more or less doing that. Like every ceremony is filled with that immense strain of having this physical and emotional and mental force trying to crush me. And not only can I hold myself up against it, I can hold it at a distance that I can relax and actually feel aesthetic emotion, like sorrow or joy or whatever.
Story.
What's that?
That's a biblical
kind of
story.
It's kind of, yeah, it's kind of like who is it? Isaac Jacob wrestling the angel, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then he became Israel after that, right? Name changed,
I think so. Yeah. So that's one way to look at it. And so you have been, and I'm sorry for your trouble, but you are being called to grow in courage and strength by confronting this difficulty, you know, and you totally can. And the first thing that you do, you totally made the right move. You trust your intuition, right? If it doesn't feel right, then you don't go with it, right? And you hold your own against it. These are just, you are a human being. These things are not superior to you at all. You know what I mean? They're forces in your unconscious that you have. As long as you don't let them get to you and the core you of who you are, you're ultimately invulnerable to them, no matter how much you suffer.
So just to clarify, Sean, you're saying that do you believe that these entities exist outside of the self? Or
yes, not? I do. I happen to believe. So
how do you, if you don't mind if I press on it, how do you square what you said about how it's all part of your unconscious?
Okay, so to me, the shamanic model reality postulates that we live effectively in an infinite ocean of consciousness. We exist in that, just like in any ocean, there are flora and fauna. There's a whole psychic ecology, and some of those things out there, they want to eat you, or they want to feed off of you and stuff like that, right? So in a sense, like they are external. Ultimately, the question of whether or not they are literally exist is almost immaterial. What matters is the way that you conceptualize them influences the way that you deal with them. And so if you just think of this up, oh, this is just an unearthed emotional complex or whatever, that doesn't allow you to plant your feet and fight the way you kind of like, oh, this is an evil spirit that is trying to attach itself to me and feed on me. Because then that lets you get that fuck you thing going, you know what I mean? And then it gives you that extra bit of strength to get past it.
So, but again, it brings me back to my question. Is that just a technique, like saying this is something outside to give you the strength to fight it? Or is it really something outside that you really do need to gather the strength to fight?
I personally think it really is. I mean, I know that some people say, oh, you just have to relax into it, but that's because they've never been confronted by this stuff. It's like trying to tell somebody who's getting physically mugged, just relax into the beating. It'll be over soon enough. Like, fuck that. You know what I mean? Yeah. This is a, like, and any real, I mean, I don't claim what I do is shamanism, or I did, but I'm not going to anymore. But any shaman will tell you that there are consequences to working with this stuff. You know what I mean? And these things will attach themselves to your consciousness structure and feed on you and cause all kinds of problems. And I think that might be one good model that maybe we'll have in the future for mental illness, is that people get psychic parasites that feed bad ideas into their heads, and that has to be dealt with at that level.
Yeah, I'm kind of dealing with that right now myself. So I haven't really said this much to anybody, so you're all going to be the first to hear this, but I'm definitely carrying something with me after my last ayahuasca journey. Like something got in and is around in there. I got to eat some mushrooms and go beat the shit out of it and get it.
Can I tell you guys can I tell you a story real quick about something just like that?
Yeah, please.
2 summers ago, I was working out in my garage. So Keith, I have this ceremony that I do, and sometimes I do it publicly, and there's costumes and lights and the whole bit, but mostly I just do it by myself. It's like a 3.5 hour thing that I do. It's a playlist of songs that I work through that have this sort of narrative structure, right? And I do it as a transformational sort of thing, but I do it over and over again because I'm improving my skill with it. Like, that's the thing, like any kind of ritual that you repeat, you can get better at. So I've done this somewhere in the mid 90s at this point. I always work with heroic and super heroic doses. And so 2 summers ago, I was
for those dose ranges. What are you classifying as heroic and super heroic?
Between 5 and 10 grams with almost always with the Syrian rue as with the harmaline, is harmaline in it. So it's like plus pot.
Or you call
sometimes
it Silawaska, right?
Silawaska is how it's sometimes referred to. Yeah. So I was doing a ceremony out of my garage and everything was going great. And all of a sudden I felt something fly into me. I felt it. And all of a sudden my visions went sideways. Everything got really like twisted and ugly, and everything was kind of like fucked up for the rest of the evening. And a couple weeks went by, and then I was due to do it again. And I went in, and this time I was doing the work, and so I had made a switch in this particular ceremony. I don't know why, but for a certain point, the ceremony is structured along the lines of the hero's journey, right? So there's a song that goes with each stage of the hero's journey, like Joseph Campbell Hero's Journey. And for the Call to Adventure one, I had been using Starman by David Bowie, and I decided to make a switch. I decided to use Moon Age Daydream instead for whatever reason, right? So I'm to that point, and that's about maybe a half hour or 40 minutes in the ceremony. The effects of it were really suppressed. But as the ceremony of the visionary effects of the medicine just wasn't really working. But I started to feel more and more uneasy, like something was wrong. And then when that song started, I suddenly, in my closed eye visions, I had a really clear image of a glowing blue female figure. And she was I knew she was a witch, and she had sort of taken, not possession of me per se, but she had inserted herself into my consciousness structure. And she was the one who was suppressing the medicine. And she was the one who was like causing me all these problems. And then as I was looking at her, all of a sudden, I imagine you're looking through a closed circuit television into an elevator. Are you with me so far? Like a security cam, there's a security camera in an elevator and you're watching on the closed circuit television, except the closed circuit television is more real than real. And so I'm looking at her through that, and I saw something come fucking tearing in from out of nowhere and absolutely like just ripped into her savagely. And the medicine exploded through my body. All of a sudden it was just like from fucking 0 to 100 miles an hour, like that. Like a flood, at full Technicolor, everything. And I was like, oh, a magic. It was just like that. Like I went from that state of, because to that point, and this is what's so difficult about these ceremonies, until I get to that point, it's always just me laboring under a high dose. That's psychic stress of a high dose. I'm just Sean Manseau. And then at a certain point when I feel that it's a physical sense of transformation. Like you feel energy flow into you, and everything gets, what was taking effort suddenly becomes fluid and easy. It's like a flow state. And then I'm damn it. And I'm like I said, my shamanic superhero self. And so when that thing, whatever that was, came from outside of me and took that force down, then I was free to do that. And so I guess what I'm saying is I really do regard these things as when you do this stuff, you are involving yourself at drama at like very high levels. Like they're psychic facts, but they're facts nonetheless. And they're real experiences.
Yeah, I told you I'd given my mother the DMT, right?
Yep.
And so
you're right back. Give me 1 second.
She asked me to hit it for a second time, and to have a second experience, not a second hit. She had done the 3 hits, so she said she's going to do it a second time, and I was taking a break, but I said, you know what, I'll go in too after she takes her hits. And I took it, and I only took 1 hit. It was a sub breakthrough, and I knew that, but it wouldn't let me take any more hits. I was overpowered. So I sat back and I closed my eyes, and I saw these like alien or ancient lettering scrolled past my head, and then I was sitting in front of the veil, and I was pretty sure of that. But it was beautiful, and I was okay with it. I was looking at it. It was like there was like a green face in there, and I was like, cool, just totally having a good time. And then something, I think when I'm on DMT, I think about like what I'm watching. It's like almost like you're watching a screen almost,
Yep.
And so in the bottom right hand corner of my field of view, as I'm looking at the veil, something was fuzzy down there, and I went to look, and I got all these no fingers and these middle fingers, like
Yeah.
Like I've heard Joe Rogan talk about it after I
Yeah.
had that experience too, and I was like, oh yeah, well,
Yeah.
you had that too. And so it told me not to look. And I had just had that experience where I saw the big guy, the emanating purple, and the Merkaba and everything, and I was like, I was feeling kind of cocky. And I said, I don't want anything kept from me. I don't want any secrets kept from me. I want to
Famous
see.
last words.
I know, I was just like, uh-oh.
Famous fucking last words. I go and look down, and this time I'm not admonished at all, or you know. And I look down, and I can actually see the edge of the veil. It's like a tattered tapestry type of thing, right? And I could just see how it is. And then on the edge of the veil, there is a demon-like woman who's hanging on to the edge from the other side, looking in at me and looking at me like I'm lunch. Like this kind of thing. Like doing. And I was terrified.
Yeah.
I was terrified. And I later had, like a week later, I couldn't get her out of my mind, this out of my mind. And a week later, I had a dream. And it was a sex dream. But it was with what I think now is a succubus.
Her. Oh, no shit. Yeah.
Her.
Tell me this one.
She was beautiful, bluish gray skin, gorgeous, and on top of me. And mind you, this is a little personal, but I've never had a nocturnal emission like my whole life. Right?
Yeah.
I came within this much of it. I knew it. And the funny thing was, in my dream, I was laying in my bed the same way that I was actually physically laying in my bed. So in the same spot in my bedroom, everything. And both, I happen to be laying on my back. I'm 100% a side sleeper. I've never sleep on my back. And I happen to be asleep on my back and also laying, you know, in the dream, she's on top of me. Best sexual experience of my life, let me tell you. But I woke up from that. Something woke me up right before the end.
Yeah.
And I literally sat up and looked for her because the reality was the same as my reality.
Right.
And I felt this feeling in the air that she was pissed.
Yeah, because she wanted your Shakti. You almost gave her that energy.
She wanted it. And I told a friend about this story like months later. I'm telling a friend, and something in my kitchen cabinet flew out of my cabinet. So, you know, I had to get the sage. I bought the sage off of Amazon, which I was like, is this work still if I buy it off of Amazon?
You gotta try, man. That's the thing. So we have to like, we've got such a catch and catch can thing now. Like all we have is these scraps from other traditions, like to try to, because this is the thing that I want to like tell everybody. Like if you guys are, if society is going to try to normalize this stuff, this is going to start happening to people. Like, and we're not really prepared for it. And the scientific establishment is not prepared for it at all about what they're going to unleash.
Well, that's
how do we prepare?
What's that, Keith?
How do we prepare? Like, do you do like a prayer or something, or ask for safety, or?
Oh yeah. Well, for me, it depends on which goddess I'm trying to get in touch with, and depending on what that is, I'll use a different incense. I'll say a different prayer. I'll burn different other things. Like I have some belladonna berries, which I don't ever employ unless I'm trying to connect with Ikati.
Are you actually able to connect with someone who you intend to connect with?
Every time.
Really?
Every time. Yeah. And the other thing that I want to say about this, and this might also be one of the reasons that I don't have bad trips and why I'm able to reach the levels and the goddesses that I'm shooting for, is that this isn't an act with me. Before I've been a goddess worshiper for a very long time, and my goddess worship predates to a certain extent my psychedelic use. I mean, it got way stronger afterward, but it predates it, and I live every day that way. Like Sean, you know Eden, we hike up Mount Tabor every morning, or almost every morning. We just did today. That's why my hair looks as good as it does, because I got sweaty and didn't take a shower before we started the podcast. But you know, every time we're up there, it's like we'll see garbage like on the ground, and I always pick it up and dispose of it, always. And that's just that's something I do, and I believe that she sees that. Now, I don't know if that's true or not, but from what I can tell, she sees that. And she sees the way I care for the planet. She sees the way I care for animals. She sees the way I care for people. And so my experiences are all, you know, goddess head experiences. There's no, you know, she just opens those doors right to heaven for me every time. So,
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the mountaintop is a great place to connect. I've had many psychedelic experiences while on top of the mountaintop, and I think it does get you closer or something. There's something about being at the high elevation.
Could be. I'm a little weird with this though. I don't actually like having my deep experiences outside. Not that I have anything against outside. It's just that like all my magical accoutrements right here. So I just, you know, I kind of like to have everything.
What do you think of that, dude?
What's that?
What does Gaia think of that? I think Gaia might want you to go outside and play with her a little.
Never brought it up to me. She actually, yeah, we have a very intimate relationship and lots of pillow talk, and that's never come up once.
Can you tell us more about that?
Sure. Would you
about
like
your first, just your experiences? What's your most profound experience, say, with Gaia, or how do you communicate?
Sure. So the most profound experience I've ever had was just a few weeks ago, as it turns out. My partner and I and a couple of friends of ours went to an ayahuasca retreat a few hours south of Portland. Actually, it's just outside Ashland, Sean, like an hour east of Ashland, and an hour west of Ashland. And I have a lot of trouble with self-esteem and self-love and thinking that I am worth, you know, anything more than a turd on the street. I have a lot of trouble with that. And for the first time, Gaia actually like yelled at me about that. Not in like a mean way, but in a caring way. She was actually yelling at me and how I shouldn't be that way. And I finally said, I'm like, well, why? What does it matter? And she said, and I'll never forget these words, she said, because you are sacred to me. And I don't think she just meant me personally. I think she just meant, you know, humanity in general. She was just like, you are sacred to me and you are a part of me. And if I am sacred to you, like I can't possibly be sacred to you if you don't recognize how you are sacred to me as well. And I'm actually struggling with that a little bit, because when you've habitually hated yourself for 30 some odd years, it's difficult to like crawl back from that. But now every time I kind of find myself falling back into my old habits of self-deprecation or thinking I'm not good enough, I'm like, oh, wait a minute. In the very least, I'm sacred to Gaia. And I guess the point of what I'm getting here is that whenever someone will ask sometimes like, well, how do you know you're just not talking to yourself? How do you know that because I would never say that to myself. I would never say, you know, that I am sacred, because I kind of feel like a pretentious asshole saying that right now. You know what I mean? Like it feels weird and kind of icky, and I kind of want to get it off me. Like what? So I wouldn't make that up. You know what I mean?
So it's a telepathic type of conversation, right?
What's that?
Would you call it like a telepathic type of conversation where there's it's like your mind's voice talking with another voice?
It's not my okay. Yeah, except I was actually kind of making it odd for everybody else in the ceremony because I was speaking out loud back to her.
Yeah.
So I was, you know, and yeah, it's just like, and when like that whole idea is like, how do I know I'm not making it up? I know I'm not making it up the same way I know that I'm not making up this conversation we're having right now. I don't know what, Sean, you're about to say, and Keith, I have no idea what you're about to say. And so in the same thing, like when I'm in Gaia's palace, when I'm in that space, I don't know what she's about to say. And sometimes she says things to me like, you are sacred to me, that I don't even know how to deal with that. And I'm just now trying to like sit with it and meditate on it, because this is a new thing for me. And I'm just trying to, I'm trying to work it out now. And yeah.
So I'd like to piggyback off that a little bit and
Sure,
and come at it from a slightly different angle. But it's not going to be, so I feel like my job today, Tom, is to be your shadow. Okay, so I'm going to offer like a shadow aspect of that stuff. So Keith, just so you know, right? I've been doing this stuff for about 4 years. Doing this work seriously, but it started as like a full blast archetypal activation. Like mushrooms are notorious for giving people messianic ideas. And basically there was this one night when I had discovered that, you can actually control your psychedelic experience by using different music. Like you can actually get different visionary results using different songs. Like I was experimenting and realizing that all the songs on my playlist were like spells in a grimoire, and then there was this one night where I had this breakthrough, and and it actually resulted, it came as a result of combining sigil magic with psychedelics. And I got a full blast download of this whole scheme that I came to sort of try to realize, right? I got a working prototype for a religion of the psychedelic, of the science fictional future. And with that came a mandate: go forth and teach, go tell the world, you are going to do this. This is going to be something. And so, a lot of times what happens when you get hit with that, and this happens in Jungian analysis too, it's referred to as archetypal inflation. Like when you identify with, when an archetype gets activated, like the prophet in your unconscious, it's very, very easy to get sucked into that and be like, I am the prophet, I am the Messiah, I am going to be doing this, right? And so lots of people, and that's not a good look. Like a lot of people come back and they're like, I'm Jesus Christ, I'm John the Baptist. Do you think
that's what people say? Do you think that's why people say that, like, I am God? Do you think that they experience it and then they, because I have this conversation so many times online and in these group discussions where they say, no, you're God, I'm God, we're all God, or I'm God, or
approach.
I have a hard time. I'm definitely not God.
Well, no, you certainly not at this level of reality, but in an upper, I think I don't like to look to the past for explanations of my experiences, although it is nice to have experiences and then find themselves sort of like resonant with other models of reality. And one thing that has come up for me in the 30 years that I've been working with psychedelics is the emanationist model of reality being constructed in levels, all the way up from our level all the way up to the absolute. And you sort of exist at every level along the way, as almost like Matryoshka dolls, one enclosing the next, right? And so at the very top level, and you can have this experience in psychedelics, you are the Godhead, you are the void, or the step down where it's like the divine syzygy of masculine and feminine, or the self, their child, you know what I mean, in that trinity. You can experience yourself from that level. The problem is coming back to this level and remaining identified with it and thinking that makes you different from everybody else, because everybody else around you is also a manifestation of that same thing, right?
It's odd because I've never had the messianic impulse. Like my experiences with Gaia are humbling. They're not like, they don't inflate my ego. They remind me that I am just a human.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Like,
well, I'm not saying that I don't think I ever, I was lucky. And so I have a degree in the psychology of religion. I know a little bit about this stuff, and I knew to be on, and I've been a lay Jungian my whole life. So I knew to be on the lookout for that. So when that message came down, I was like, fuck that. But on the other hand, this is a really interesting idea. Let me start doing this stuff, right? And so I've done it, and I've developed this approach, and I went out and I did these shows and stuff like that. And all the while, there's always been this promise, like, keep going. We know how difficult it is. It is going to work. You are going to people to be able to understand what you're trying to do, which ultimately is trying to get people to reconceptualize religion as art. And what I see in the future is religion basically being an artistic experience that you can have. Like what I would love if Tom could put together a ritual that will allow me to experience the Divine Mother the way he does. You know what I mean? Or you could put something together that would allow me to experience the divine that you do, because we all have a unique relationship with it. We all see it in different ways, and we all are constantly growing our understanding of it in a way like that you would of anybody that you love. Like, you want to understand as many aspects of it as you possibly can. So I have this thing that's been driving me relentlessly for 4 years, and it's not coming true. Nobody's listening to me. Nobody really like got what I was trying to do. The support and stuff that I've been promised in those states is not coming through. The same voice that comes to me with the force of divine revelation, like these absolutely mind-blowing experiences, visionary experiences of the goddess or the self, you know what I mean, has made promises to me which are not coming true. And that is an interesting thing to sort of like work with. Like, how do you balance those two things? It's a difficult position.
Well, have
When you say that, I want to do it with you though. Like, if I'm hearing about your ritual, I wanted to say earlier, I want to say, like, I want to go to fly up there and do that. I mean, it sounds cool. It sounds great. Really.
It is cool, but the thing is, it's rigorous. Like Tom was saying, like, he couldn't believe that you lasted that long. But in a ways, the way I think about it, Keith, this is psychedelic ritual as group workout. You know what I mean? And among other things, you need to be able to participate in something for 3.5 hours and not lose focus and be able to stick with it, right? But the idea is that you can participate. It's not designed for, and this is what I've done it a couple times in Portland, and I realized I made an essential mistake in the way that I presented it. It's not a performance in that I'm supposed to be standing on stage and people are there to watch. It's supposed to be, at the very least, a small group of people performing as a unit, as a band. You know what I mean? Like, I realized the other day, like, oh, what I tried to do would be like James Hetfield getting on stage with a little practice amp and like just jamming Metallica riffs and expecting people to get like what Metallica is. But you just can't, you know what I mean? Metallica is an entelechy, right? It's this group thing, all these people playing their roles to create something so much huger than what they could do. And until I basically find that group, it's never going to work. And there's almost no point in going out and doing it in public until that happens.
Do you think it's because of people's personal music tastes are also different, and that they have these preconceptions about each say, like you mentioned Rihanna earlier. Mm-hmm. Now, when I think of Rihanna, I think of it's like far from something of depth. And
you have to have a certain amount of like flexibility. Yeah, exactly. and playfulness, you know what I mean? And you also have to like I have pretty omnivorous musical taste. I love a lot of rock music. I love a lot of pop. The last part of the show is all Neutral Milk Hotel songs. You know what I mean? It's like you have to, but at the same time, when you go to a concert, you're not necessarily going to like every song that they play. Or you go to a nightclub, right? And go out dancing. You're not going to like every song, but if you're in a group, you do it, you participate for the good of everybody. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And nothing is going to be perfect for one person, but you can make an allowance and be like, I know, like if Tom did this, I wouldn't necessarily know and like everything that he was using, but I would be in it. I'd be like, I'm here for this. I'm committed to you to help you do this because I want to feel what you feel.
Oh yeah, and I felt the same way when you did it at Pegasus that one time, and I participated. Yeah, I mean, there were some songs on your playlist that just do not speak to me at all. But when I'm in it, like, you know what I mean? I'm like, oh, well, fuck Monster Magnet. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, no, but it's true because I can't stand that song. I think it's awful, but it's, but it doesn't, that's not what it's, I see what you're saying. It's like, it's not about like, one of the things that like, we kind of like, we're very self-centered these days because of social media. And
siloed, right?
Yeah. We forget to, like, we're so used to, well, this is my playlist. I have my customized shoes. It's like, and we're in this age of customization, but there are certain things, like if you want to grow, you can't customize like climbing that mountain. You're either going to fucking do it every day and get to the top or you're not. Yeah. And I think that the shamanic cabaret works a similar way. And some people like, and this is just something that like I've thought about because I think it's brilliant. And the fact that people aren't taking to it might have to do with like music is a very personal thing. Now I have the ability to step outside myself because I'm not a self-centered shithead, and I can, be open to other things that aren't, don't necessarily jive with me. But a lot of people, especially I would say like Zoomers, I don't know if they have that ability anymore.
Yeah.
Because they grow up with the fucking screen right in front
they're
of them.
so, and they're, I mean, that's one of the downfalls of this current generation is they're not used to discomfort, and
not
really,
at all.
And I used to go, you guys know what ecstatic dance is?
Of course.
Right. So I would go to this ecstatic dance thing called Muse here in Portland. I don't like electronic dance music, like at all. But I forced myself to go to that week after week because the process of going to that and then having a good time in spite of the fact that I wasn't really into that music made me better. You know what I mean? It expanded me, and that's real, but it was uncomfortable. And most people, they don't like discomfort. It's alien to them. Yeah, something to be avoided as opposed to be embraced.
Yeah, but I think it's even like, you have a good point. It's not even that it's supposed to be avoided or be like versus be embraced. I think you're right. It's just alien to them. It's just this concept is like, well, what do you mean I can't just Google my opinion? Like it's like, and that's how people grow, and that's how you literally shape like competent members of society, which is why I'm a little scared for the future. You shape competent members of society through stress. You don't form a diamond by putting a piece of coal between two fucking pillows. You form a diamond through pressure.
Yes. So speaking of which, so this is why I brought this up, because I wanted to ask you guys, how would you think when you hear me tell this story and you hear me express that this thing that has been utterly transformational for me on a personal level and given me experiences that I think are the equivalent of anything any Catholic mystic ever experienced is unreliable or hasn't come through, hasn't fulfilled itself? What do you think?
I think Tom and I both kind of agreed that maybe it's because people are so preconditioned or stigmatized by music that I was thinking maybe you could have people choose songs, because maybe you're getting into basically a track, since you're pre-choosing the songs. Maybe you could even have a more of an adventure and then more of that pressure, and include the people to have like they're picking a song that are throwing in there that you totally wouldn't expect.
Well, and the issue with that is it's structure. It's a jukebox musical. You know what I mean? And so going to that and being like, I don't want to hear this. I'm going to this musical, but I don't want to hear this song. I want to hear this song. It's the song tells a story, and it's structured in this very, very specific way of going through the hero's journey. So there's a song specifically chosen for each section, and there's a story that goes along with it too. You know what I mean? The songs are there to illustrate the target emotion that you're trying to hit. Like, so are you into metal at all, Keith?
Yeah, I'm a guitar player.
Do you know the band Astronoid?
Astronoid, I don't.
They do this really dreamy kind of thrash music. They've got this song called Up and Atom, which is one of the ones that I use, and it's for the point in so there's a story, and the narrative for the masculine part is like basically you're just this kid who's going nowhere in life, and then you get kidnapped by Ziggy Stardust aboard a flying saucer, and he takes you to a different planet where you have to find the means to save the world, right? And so for the part where he is taking you aboard his flying saucer and you're about to hit light speed, that song, this Astronoid song, this incredibly dreamy thrash song, is the song that illustrates that feeling for that point. You know what I mean? And after experimenting with a half dozen songs for that point, that's the one that works for that show, for as my art, as this thing, as this extended movie or whatever you want to think of it as taking place.
You're working with triggers, essentially.
Yes, exactly. And that's where I tried that early on when I was experimenting with this first and trying to like give people like the opportunity. I'll put on a song and you put on a song and you put on a song, and it's great and you can have these experiences, but the thing about working through these emotions in this sequence is it creates an experience of catharsis or emotional release. You know what I mean? The same way that like you go through all the tension in a story, now you're in your X-Wing flying through the trench of the Death Star, and now like, you know what I mean? And like, now it's just the final shot, and then those torpedoes go in, and then the thing explodes, and you're like, yes, that's the moment that you're trying to create. But it only happened because you had these other emotional experiences like along the way to that point, So that's why, unfortunately, It can't just be a free for all.
Yeah,
You could, but it would be a different thing.
I agree with that. And if I may take a crack at answering your question as well, I would also say that a lot of like there's like my own magical system. I mean, it's a pretty, you know, it's based off some pretty basic ideas of, you know, free will, intellect, emotion, and action. And the free will, intellect, and emotion are the three spiritual gifts that we have. Action is the one physical gift we have, because that's our ability to take our will, our emotion, and our intellect and manifest it, like shape it, manufacture it into something. What I would be curious about is like, as far as like, I'd almost kick the question back to you, Sean. What are you doing on the action side of this to actually bring this out to more and more people? Because I don't see you promoting it very often. I don't see you, I mean, we haven't had conferences for the past year, but like I've never seen you even give like a you know, like we've had a few virtual conferences. Like, have you ever thought of speaking at one of them and spreading the I just, what I'm saying is that like this world of just where social media just floods everybody with all kinds of shit, like, are you in that game? Are you trying to also push it into popular consciousness? Because again, I see you doing the emotional work, I see you doing the intellectual work, I see you doing the will work. I don't really see you doing the action work. And well, that would be my answer to your question.
So that's an interesting question, right? Because right before my third show that I had scheduled, the pandemic hit and everything shut down. And then for a while there, I was like on social media trying to promote this. Like Keith, I don't belong to your Facebook group because I don't have Facebook anymore.
Good for you.
I gave it up, but I was in a couple different, I was consistently posting in a couple different forums because I would do ceremonies and make videos, or I would make videos about like concepts and stuff. And then the response to it was so negative. People were not down with it at all. And it was, you know, it takes its toll. It does, because the thing about doing something like this is you are trying to actively believe it, and yet the world is trying to destroy your belief at the same time, like constantly.
That's where the entheogens group was started, actually.
What's that?
That's why the entheogens group was started, actually, because I had gone in, I had that experience with the Merkaba and the guy, and I started talking about it in this group, and people came and they're like, "Oh, you're talking about religion and stuff like that," or like the entities that I was experiencing weren't palatable to them.
Yeah.
So they would jump down my throat. So I was like, wow, there's got to be somewhere where you're not stifled by people's just what they're turned off by, you know.
I would also, you kind of put it there in the last thing you said, Sean, when you said like you have this thing that you believe in and the people are just trying to like stomp down that belief. I guess that's where we might part company. I don't have belief, I have gnosis. Like, they're two different things. Like, I don't believe in you, Sean, because I know you. You're right. Look, we've hung out, like, you know.
Well, that's Tom, that's what I'm getting at here, right? Because one of the things that's been promised to me in these ceremonies is that I am going to basically like, look, I understand how ridiculous this is going to sound, but I'm gonna tell you, like, is that I am gonna somehow come into the financial resources that I can actually like put this on full. I can hire the people that I need in order to realize my vision, which basically means recruiting a small troupe of like singers and dancers and actors, and like renovating a whole church, like with a full, you know, like nightclub type laser experience in the whole, and make a documentary about it, right? And that would be the way that I could fully give my, I could translate my vision or realize my vision into the world. And so when that doesn't happen, you have the moment of gnosis, but everybody suffers. And then look, you and I are different in that this is relatively easy for you. This is not easy for me. I definitely suffer from the dark night of the soul, like more often than not, like many other classical mystics have, you know what I mean? Where the world itself, it's like, it's almost, the Hindus have a term called Maya, which is like illusion, right? And I used to think that meant this, that the world is just really just energetic patterns, and we misconstrue it as being, solid matter. And I think that's at one level that's true, but it also means the mistaken belief that this is all that there is. And Maya is a kind of gravity that will drag you down out of those exalted spaces to where, like, oh my God, it's all just drugs. You know what I mean? When you're confronted with, your loneliness and your lack of financial resources or whatever it is, lack of community, all those things, you know what I mean? Like, Maya will grind you out. And so that is, it's not a matter of not having achieved gnosis. Gnosis is there, but gnosis without support can be ground away. Just like I always say, like, you can unenlighten the Buddha with a cattle prod in about 45 minutes. Get all about that shit.
You couldn't tear Gaia from my heart with that. You couldn't. And that's what I mean by, like, yeah, I'm not talking about the gnosis when you're in that space. Yeah. I'm talking about making sure when you come back into this incarnation that we're in, that you retain that gnosis. And I don't mean like, I probably, like, again, to me, all I'm saying is there's a difference between knowledge and belief. I do not believe in Gaia. I know Gaia. There isn't, you cannot tear her from me.
That's great, and that's great, and I'm happy for you, but it's not like that for everybody.
But what I'm saying is that I'm just trying to answer your question, or what you left off with. People, like, people do try to shit on my beliefs, or my knowledge, I should say, or they try to turn it into a belief that can be corrupted, and I just laugh at it. I think it's like shooting a fucking, a freight train with a fucking water pistol. That's right. What it feels like. It's like, yeah, whatever, go fuck yourself. Like, and maybe I'm just a guinea from New York, and that's how we are. And maybe that plays into it too. But I mean, for me, it just has to do with knowing that these things, they're not true to me. They are just true.
Sean, I think you have more of, like, the world is coming into being able to be into a place to accept what you want to offer.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of you can see this dream, this concept, and it be told that you achieve it. But I think, like, just in this reality of us having legal issues and all these other things, and it's funny to think about. We started off talking about I'd done acid 12 years ago today. Now,
was that your first time doing acid 12 years ago?
No, it wasn't my first time doing acid. It was maybe like the third or fourth time. But
it's like his 400th time.
When we think about if we go back 12 years, I couldn't. It was illegal to smoke weed, in most everywhere, maybe except California at that point.
Yeah.
So it's like where we're growing to now, and I'm amazed, and to go back to talking about the online presence of psychedelics, and it's getting stifled right now by Facebook and being censored.
Really?
But yeah, I was blown away by people showing the DMT they made, and showing their stashes online, and we're more and more living in this time to where you can have more access to people. And there's still people who, we also live in this bubble too, us talking, these psychedelic travelers here, that there's so many people who have no experience whatsoever. It's just getting opened up more and more. And I think that's going to always be on your side. And going forward, you're going to have, more people have access to you, more people with less stigma too, because there's still stigma for marijuana. And what's that?
Not in Portland.
Yeah, sure. But there's still there's these generations of older people that still think it's horrible, and those people still exist, and we still exist in that same world. So we still have to be a little aware of that, I wouldn't go and tell my grandparents about how
How you got your mom smokes EMT.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that we're in an interesting time in history right now that we're coming back to being able to experiment with our spirituality through these entheogens. And I think you got to hold on. Don't get disillusioned by where you are right now. Keep going and pushing that and be a part of that race towards being able to do that and being able to try someone's ritual. I mean, this is a really brand new concept that you're bringing to the table. Like, hey, I want you to try my ritual that is amazing for growth. Like what? That's unheard of, man. You kind of blew me away with that. So, well,
Tom would say this is probably, and it's actually probably more a return of a very old way of doing things, right? Like this is probably it's probably just a mystery religion, but without that nomenclature.
You're still reintroducing it. And there's one more thing I also want to say that you like to just bear in mind. When Jesus, at least it's either in Matthew or Luke, when he's hanging on the cross, what does he say? He says,
my God, why have you
forsaken me? Mm-hmm. And he couldn't see. Maybe you're just waiting for your Paul. Your Paul of Tarsus hasn't arrived yet. Maybe you are not actually going to live to see the impact that the shamanic cabaret and phonomancy has on the world. And that sucks. And don't get me wrong, because we all want to see the fruits of our labor. But I mean, another one from Jesus, the prophet has no place to lay his head in his own home, or, it's like one of the, and you might just be going through, a good old fashioned Jesus experience, for lack of a better way of putting it. You might not ever get to see it. However, these seeds you're planting now, and the reason that the goddess and these entities are saying, no, keep going, is because you are supposed to release this into the world. Maybe you'll never be in this incarnation to see it, but it's still going to reverberate and echo throughout time.
Well, it's funny that you end up telling yourself different stories. And that's one that I imagine is like, put all this stuff up on YouTube and everything, and someday 30 years from now somebody finds it and it finally, like, the time is finally right and it piques their interest and they're like, what the fuck is this? And then they go find my book, and then everything else comes.
Well, exactly. So you have to also bear that in mind. And again, that's not the most satisfying answer.
No, but it's
at all. Like, I would be very sad if the witch's ointment became a national bestseller the day after I died. Cool. But I would actually like to be alive to see it.
Yeah. Yeah, so, that's funny. But it is an interesting question though. And I admire you, Tom, for never. And I frankly, I envy you that you don't have that. You don't doubt ever. You don't doubt ever? Really? That's amazing.
I mean, so what's interesting is after my last ayahuasca retreat, I had actually wanted to know what it feels like for an atheist to have one of these kinds of experiences. It was one of the things I asked Aya to show me. I'm like, show me what this actually feels, because I can't. One of the reasons Keith and I connected was that I can't imagine not having a spiritual experience with these medicines. Like, I don't know what that looks like. And some people, they take high doses of mushrooms, they take, 5-MeO-DMT, and they come like, yeah, no, I'm still an atheist. And it's like, I don't know. What's that?
It just doesn't for them. Like, I would say once you see it, you can't unsee it. So I think that there's just some disconnect. Like how could you not see all that beauty and, or whatever. Everything is indicative of it.
Maria Sabina, the great Maria Sabina, once said that she was talking about the mushrooms. She said the mushrooms are like your soul, and all souls are different, which is why her sister, Anna Maria, who also wanted to become a curandera, couldn't. And she ate mushrooms the way Maria Sabina did. And she respected them and had that reverence and the whole thing, but she never became a healer the way Maria Sabina was, even before Gordon Wasson, shone a spotlight on her. Like, people went from miles around to be healed by Maria Sabina. Nobody went to Anna Maria, though, her sister. even though, like, but for all intents and purposes, if mushrooms do the same thing to everyone, which I don't think they do, her sister would have, like, we would all have these same experience, shared experiences. I think that you can actually exercise your soul. I think that a lot of people don't realize that. And so they skip over that aspect of it. Like, I exercise my soul more than I exercise, my physical body.
Well, so are they not ready? Are they not chosen? Why do you think people don't see that?
So I could give you the ancient Gnostic answer, which is not a very nice answer. It's an elitist answer, and I don't agree with this, and I'm trying to find my way around it a little bit. But one of the things that people today, when they talk about Gnosticism, people today tend to look at Gnostics as these lovey-dovey, like hippie, we are all one. No! One of the reasons ancient Gnosticism failed was because it was so elitist and it was so snooty, and they were pretty much going around saying to everybody, look, you're just not worthy. They saw there were three people. There were the perfects, which were you achieved gnosis. Then there were the worthy, meaning that you were contender to achieve gnosis, you just hadn't yet. And then there was the overwhelming majority of people who are just empty vessels. I don't believe that, so let me just be clear about it. I don't believe that at all. But I do believe, as I was saying, like how Maria Sabina, I would say it's closer to Maria Sabina than, Marcion, who was a Gnostic of the 2nd century Common Era. I think that people just have different souls and they don't work. And excuse me, in the same way I'll put it this way. So Sean is into fitness in a way that I am not. Sean can lift more weight than I can. Now, that doesn't mean it's impossible for me to ever achieve lifting, 300 pounds or whatever the cutoff would be. I could work out and I could work to get there. I think too many people see these medicines as magic bullets. Like, well, I don't need to work on myself. I just need an LSD trip for what ails me. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and they're looking for the one-stop cure.
Exactly.
Like, I'll take this and I'll never be depressed. But unfortunately, that's how it's being presented to them.
Yes.
In the media, right? So,
well, because one of the problems that we're having, I think it's up to people like the three of us and many others, is to actively stop the way that psychedelics are being introduced into the mainstream. They're being introduced into the mainstream in the dumbest, most bullshit way possible. And Sean just articulated that. And I think that's one of the problems. An analogy that I've used before is that, and then I promise I'll stop talking. People go to ayahuasca ceremonies the same way that they go to keg parties. And if you're on your way to a keg party and you light up a cigarette and it was the last one in your pack and you throw, that cigarette box on the ground, you're not going to think twice about it. But Gaia saw that. So don't think you're going to throw your shit on the ground and litter this beautiful earth and think that she's not going to give you fucking hell for it. And then that person, instead of taking responsibility for their actions, they're, throwing litter on the ground, them disrespecting a person, them, just being a shithead, whatever. There's, it was ayahuasca. Oh, those are just drugs. It just fucked with me. It's not good. It's like, no, you're a fucking asshole who's not doing the actual work. That's what's happening here. But nobody, again, God is forbid. It's anybody, it's got to be everybody else's fault. Can't be my fault. I'm fucking perfect, just as me. It's bullshit. But this is what we're dealing with, and this is why people are not going to have the kind of experiences that, I would say, not to do my own horn, that I have. It's because I do spiritual exercise.
So you think it's like an ego issue, which we hear that word way too much in the psychedelic community. Ego. And people are like, oh, your ego's showing.
Egos are all good. I'm glad it is, because egos are beautiful. Because if you didn't have an ego, this conversation would be
schizophrenic.
As talking to a fucking rock, which is not very interesting. Now, that's not to say you should have an inflated ego, but it's like, this whole look, if you don't have an ego, if you're going for ego loss in those spaces, then there is no way for any entity to contact you.
Well, it's a self-centered approach, I think, too, what you're saying. Like the person who's littering, for example, is not thinking of who's going to come upon their litter or, have to someone else is gonna.
It's about seeing yourself as separate from the world. You know what I mean? And not taking into account how connected you are to everything. And everything that Tom's talking about is really about conditioning consciousness in order to have the best possible experience with this stuff by, right, creating a state in which you have your ego, but you don't fully identify your ego. You more identify with the self, you know, with a capital S, by
just to receive
being moral and being thoughtful. And
yeah.
Tom, I want to circle back to, I was going to say, I'd like to circle back to Maria Sabina for a second, because as you know, Maria Sabina, eventually she felt abandoned by the mushrooms.
Yes.
So I wanted to know what your take on that was.
It's sad. It's one of those things where
Keith, do you know that story before we get into it?
I don't know the story. But it made me think of how McKenna had an experience where he had a terrible experience too, right? But so Maria Sabina, who is this famous, God, what group was she from? What village?
Huejutla de Jimenez.
She was a Mexican healer, right? And she worked with mushrooms and healed people, but she called them the little doctors. And then after
the little saints.
Little saints. And so after Gordon Wasson wrote that article and all these hippies started coming down, eventually they stopped working for her. And they said, and then she ended up pretty much heartbroken at the end of her life. And so I'm interested in what Tom's take on that is.
I mean, my heart isn't as broken as hers over that, but yeah, when I found out about that, it was, and the truth is, like, man, I don't, like, it's something that I'm still trying to, like, I think that's a great question. Unfortunately, I'm not sure yet of my thoughts on the matter. And I've thought, I have a whole chapter in my new book on Maria Sabina. And
oh, wow.
Yeah. And I told the story from her perspective, because every time in every book where there's, you know, the famous meeting between Wasson and Maria Sabina, they always tell it through Wasson's perspective. I tell the story through her perspective as these strangers coming and destroying her mushrooms. Right. Because we don't hear about it as this Gordon Wasson going there and bringing these mushrooms and enlightening all of us. But I tell it from her perspective. So to get back to your question, I really don't know what to think of it. I just don't. And
you think that maybe the when you get the message hang up kind of thing?
No, because she wasn't doing it for message. I mean, this was literally like her doctor's kit bag.
She was a practitioner, right? She was a practitioner. But again, that's one of those things where we are working, as we try to develop an explanatory model that can encompass all of our different experiences. That's the kind of that kind of stuff that we have to take into account too. Of course, it's difficult because we have such a limited perspective. We don't see what the transpersonal framework is. We don't know what her ultimate destiny is outside of this level of reality. We don't know what that event meant in terms of her overall personal development.
Well, it was devastating.
Oh, for here, but in terms of her higher self and where her higher self wants to go.
I see what you're saying,
yeah. I have this. You guys ever see Close Encounters of the Third Kind? You know that movie?
I know it. I've never seen it though.
There's a famous. So Richard Dreyfuss plays this electrician who sees a UFO, and then for the first half of the movie, he's obsessed with trying to manifest this image that he has in his head. He sculpts shaving cream and he sculpts mashed potato, and eventually he builds this huge mound in his living room, and he's like this full scale replica of this stone mountain. He doesn't understand what it is until he sees on the TV that it's the Devil's Tower in Wyoming. You know what I mean? And it's this revelation, and that's his call to go visit the UFO. I have this idea that the goddess has this image of us, each of us individually, from the very instant of our creation, of what we're going to be at the end of time. Her image of who we are going to be like when we are fully formed and developed. And it's our job to try to grasp that the way he tried to grasp that image that was in his head that he was sculpting in the mashed potatoes, right? And that image calls us. It's like a strange attractor at the end of each of our personal histories. And so Maria Sabina, we don't know what her strange attractor ultimately looks like, because it's the sum of our joys and our pains. And so maybe pain that she experienced from having that magic withdrawn from her was going to condition her for what she was going to truly end up being later on. There's just no way to know.
And people, I mean, they trashed her house. They trashed Huejutla de Jimenez. I got a quote, this real piece of work, like, it was just like, I don't like, fuck Maria Sabina. I'm paraphrasing here, but he's like, yeah, fuck this old hag. I don't need her. Just give me mushrooms. You know what I mean? Like, she was really disrespected by these assholes that, completely trashed her village and made a mockery of her practices. And, the heart breaks for her. It very much does.
There's still this like essence of like a drug culture existing, like, and that can be more present than when you go onto any of these psychedelic groups. Tom, I don't know, what are you in any other groups besides the entheogens group? Where did I find you?
I mean, I mostly, so we have the Psanctum psychedelia group. The truth of it, I've kind of just been avoiding social media.
Sure. So I think I found you on one of these groups, like the DMT group or DMT spiritual healing or something.
Yeah, I mean, people just add me to things. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
you could just do that. I don't even know what groups I'm in, but people just add me to shit. So.
But when you can actually get an idea when you see these collectives, when you have, some of them they're quite incredible. You got over 50,000 people, 75,000 people in these groups, and you get to see people. There's this big bell curve of, people who take things very seriously, people who are more casual about it. And then, you have this expectation of, wow, if you're going into this psychedelic experience that has elevated me, you just assume that other people are as elevated or they're as well intentioned with it. And you find that there's a lot of people who are like, no, it's not all that. It's just, it's just a good time. And
a lot of people just want to get high and party.
Yeah. Yeah. And you have that bell curve, that natural bell curve of, eventually in the middle, you're going to have, people who kind of go both ways, but there's never no, and a lot of people will touch on this too. They say don't expect someone to have the same experience that you've had, or don't expect, because they come from a different place and they come from a different intention, and they're naturally different, and that's why I got into these groups, is to find more people like me. And I found some, but then more often than not, you just find people who have a completely different concept from you, which is fine. But at least I think it should go towards a growth and towards something positive. Or what are you fucking doing it for?
As you said earlier, it's still so early with this stuff, right? You know what I mean? Like there was that 10 years initial explosion and then 40 years of it being completely underground. And it's going to take a really long time for us to mature as a society and our attitudes towards this stuff. But the hope can be that, and that's again what I mean about trying to come up with our own shamanic culture and tradition, like, and start educating, as Tom was saying, like we need to educate people about that this stuff can do a lot, but it can be sacred. And because it can be sacred, we are almost obligated to start treating it that way. And hopefully over time, that bell curve will start to creep to the right. You know what I mean? And more people will start to realize like, oh, this is actually important.
But I was getting back to it, those people that are just kind of, oh, I just want to eat, drugs and, party. It's like, but they don't. So for me, ritual is, and I'm going to use a dated analogy here, but ritual is like writing a letter. If I don't have the right address on the envelope, and I could have everything right except for one of the numbers, like the house number, the letter's not going to make it to that destination. Mm-hmm. The reason I use certain things to reach certain goddesses is that for exactly that reason, because I'm writing a letter to this I'm addressing this goddess, and she has specific ways that she likes to be addressed in order to get there.
That's interesting, Tom. It makes me wonder if one of the reasons why the disparity in our experience, like why yours has been relatively trouble-free and mine has been so fraught, is I'm working in a ritual context, but outside any established framework of belief. I'm not necessarily using any specific name gods. I'm not using any specific like traditional rituals, which basically burn a groove into the collective unconscious. You know what I mean? Like when you use that stuff, you're activating like pre-existing sort of stuff as opposed to, yeah. And unfortunately for me, I have this sort of like totally like DIY punk rock attitude where I'm not attracted to anything existing and I want something new and science fictional. And that is what I am sort of like groping towards, but that means a lot of missteps and a lot of hard like miles along the way.
See, I'm lazy. I
No,
know.
or
I know what Hecate likes. I know what Gaia likes.
yeah, well, just
Likes.
energetically, you like what you like. You know what I mean? It's like you're attracted to, you love what you love, and there's nothing. It's not a matter.
Well, these
I know
are
you're just
rules. I didn't
yeah.
like Hekate's affinity for black dogs and belladonna and bay leaves. That's I had nothing to do with that. That's what the ancient Greeks said. So
Right.
that's what I use. Like we had little Puccini who passed away not this in April of 2020, and but Eden saved a lot of his fur because he was a small black Pomeranian, and we work with Hecate quite a bit, and so
Mm-hmm.
she saved a decent amount of his fur so that we could still use it. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
so
Well, I mean, you're being charmingly self-deprecating by referring to yourself as lazy, but obviously you're anything but. It's just that this is who you are attracted to, these traditional goddess figures.
well, yeah, in the same way that when people talk about their traditions, like which I'm all in favor of, and which is why I think all three of us could agree that corporatization and capitalization of these medicines will destroy them because they destroy those traditions for so many people. But it's often overlooked that, hey, we Greeks have our traditions too, and they were also eradicated by Christianity. So you know what I mean? It's like,
Yep.
I wish that some people would maybe like look at us as see the commonalities in that, instead of these bullshit immutable characteristic differences and putting everybody in their own special box, where it's like, well, yeah, that's like you're wondering how the bastards stay in power. Well, you're helping them because you're putting everybody in a fucking box based on their immutable characteristics. So good for you for helping the fucking bastards in power.
Damn, Tom, you just made me depressed. Now I'm just thinking like, no, well, just I'm being flipped, but going forward with it, if what happens to like the medical marijuana, the marijuana industry happens to psychedelics, it's like you said, that's going to be just a whitewashing of everything,
Compass Pathways trying to literally patent how to give psychedelic therapy, or how to give a psychedelic in a therapy session. Like, there's literally a fucking organization trying to like put a patent on that, and it's like, you can't put a patent on something like that, but it's like, but the fact that these
it's all come back to money, and that's going to be
but that's what I'm saying, and that's what the problem is, that these people, like, they don't give a fuck about psychedelia. Like, when you looked at, there was that disgusting list on psychedelicinvest.com, which are two words that should never be near each other, and they had that list of 100 most influential people in psychedelics. There were maybe 3 or 4 names, maybe 5 tops, of people that are actually actively in the psychedelic renaissance. I would say Joe Moore from Psychedelics Today, he deserves to be on that list. Ben Sessa, my good friend, deserves to be on that list. Paul Stamets, absolutely. But then you look at the biographies of the other, 94 people, and there's nothing there about psychedelics. Like, whatever, Joe Shitforbrains likes psychedelics and has been a venture capitalist for 50 years and had this startup and that. Is like, I don't give a fuck what this guy thinks about psychedelics at all. I don't care. What is this person on a list of 100 most influential people? Like, Jesus Christ.
Joe Rogan had to be on there then.
He's on there. But it's also, you have to, Joe, let me at least say this. He is influential in psychedelic space. I don't think that he's not an expert, but that's not what they didn't say the 100 experts. They said influential. What's that?
Yeah, he doesn't claim to be an expert, which is what I like about when he talks about psychedelics.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate that he has Dennis McKenna on. He has Paul Stamets on. Not so much Michael Pollan, but the actual, like, the real deal guys, I like when he has them on, to talk about this stuff, because Stamets, the great Paul Stamets, like, he should have him on more often. I think he should be a staple on the show personally, because he can actually clear up a lot of this bullshit that is, passes, at least for me, like, as I deal with scholarship in these areas, and there's just a lot of bullshit, and that's getting too far off topic. So I won't rant about that. No worries.
Well, it's good. It's good to hear, though. It's good to get into this, because I feel like it's an inevitable.
Yeah.
You know, where it's such a youthful, juvenile state where we're in still.
Yeah, and
Guys, we're hitting the 2-hour mark.
we
Maybe
are.
should,
And I got a gypsy market I have to get all of my substances.
okay.
I go to a roving market that changes locations, and I get an email every Sunday of where it's going to be. So
That's amazing.
That isn't amazing.
yeah. So yeah. Oh wow, it's already 3 though. Fuck, they close at 4. Okay, I'm probably not going to make it today, so never mind. But yeah. So I don't know. I mean, I don't know if anyone has anything else they wanted to add.
I just want to. Can I hear about that?
What's that?
I want to hear about this gypsy traveling thing. You know, as much as you can say.
I've already said too much.
I understand.
So, Key, at some point when you and I are on the phone and we're not on a podcast that, you know, many people are going to be watching, we could get deeper into it. But for something for public consumption, I probably should edit that out.
Nah, leave it. This is the Renaissance, man.
Oh, that's how I feel about it. But some people don't. Some people are like, what do you mean psychedelic Renaissance? What is that? It's like, well, it just means that we're studying these things and reconnecting to ancient traditions and also creating modern ones.
They're not elite enough to be involved with it.
What's that?
They're not elite enough to be involved with it.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's another thing. I don't want to see elitism take over in the psychedelic space either. And it's weird because there's a balance between, we don't want to be gatekeepers, but the truth is psychedelics are not for everybody. They just aren't, any more than, you know, look, peanuts are not for everybody. You know, somebody with a peanut allergy is going to kill them. You know what I mean? They're not for everybody. And again, this narrative that's being pushed is, yeah, medicine for all, like just, you know, take some mushrooms that'll help you out. No, for some people, they could really, like, again, if they haven't been doing the spiritual work and they're not conscientious enough, it can destroy them. This is not, you know, they're not toys, these things. And they're being introduced, I feel like, to mainstream culture as toys, so to speak, and they're not.
Well, they're being introduced as a new breed of antidepressant. You know what I mean? It's something,
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It simply is getting a prescription, and they don't. I remember seeing a reference to a scientist saying they wanted to create ayahuasca in a pill, and it's like, you cannot, or you probably really should not divorce ayahuasca from the ceremonial context. It makes all the difference, right? Because it's what channels that power, and
they don't know, and that's the problem.
They're rationalists, they're materialists. They don't understand that there's an actual spiritual reality that you encounter by using this stuff, right?
Yep. Absolutely.
So well, all we can do is keep talking about it and hope and really expressing, you know, taking a stand as elders, you know, and after you've done this stuff a few dozen times, 5 dozen times, 7 dozen times, like, you have an obligation to talk about your experience, I feel, and let people know, like, the, you know, what you've seen. Because think about it, here in Oregon, we have this bill that's recently passed. It's legalized psilocybin therapy. There are going to be a lot of people who are administering it, maybe tripped 5 times in their life,
or not at all,
or not even that. And so the idea that these people are going to be, because they took a weekend course, or even a 6-week course, or even a 6-month course, if you've never done it, you don't have any insight into it. You know,
I'm a Donatist on the issue, which Donatist is a
Donatist.
Yeah. It's an old, actually, it's a Christian term, which is, this was back when the church was becoming so corrupt. That's when Donatism kind of, you know, grew out of that, because the idea is that it doesn't matter if you have a degree in theology. It doesn't matter how many times you've preached from the pulpit. If you're a piece of shit, you cannot give the Holy Sacrament. Mm-hmm. And so I'm the same way with, and it sounds like you are too, Sean, like, with entheogens, like I have a relationship with mushrooms. You know what I mean? Like there's an ongoing relationship there. And not to say that I should ever be a facilitator. I do. I mean, we do our love party facilitating thing, but that's working with MDMA, which is a totally different animal. But I don't, again, my experiences, I actually don't even like talking about my experiences very much, because they're very they're always very humbling, and I don't know. It's not how I operate, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I mean, I have to, because Keith forces it out of me every time we do a podcast. I got to talk about something, but it's not my, like, I prefer to, Sean, I prefer to talk psychedelic history.
Mm-hmm.
So,
you gotta share a little. You gotta share a little.
I know. Look, I do enjoy the spiritual, like these conversations, which is why we do this form of oddcast. It's because I like these kinds of conversations. But we are at the 2-hour mark, and I do have to go to the movies. And so if anybody wanted to, say some parting thoughts, happy to hear them.
I had a great time talking with Sean. Sean, I'd love to talk to you again, man.
Keith, it was great meeting you today. Yeah, I really enjoyed it too.
Your concept too. Like seriously, I will fly there and do it.
I'll send you a link to a presentation I gave to the Portland Psychedelic Society about the basic concepts behind it. It outlines it, so you can check that out at your leisure.
Cool. Yeah, I looked at Tom had sent me a couple links too, and I checked you out, and I knew it was going to be a great talk, man. It's been great chatting with you.
Yeah, what a great Sunday afternoon. Thanks, Tom. Thanks, Keith, for inviting me. I had a blast.
Yeah, absolutely.
Me too. Thanks for both of you as well, to Sean for coming on, and to co-counsel Keith. Thanks for doing this, man. Like, this is Keith's idea, by the way, and I'm very grateful to you for coming up with it, because I love having these kinds of conversations.
Cool, man. I had a great time.
Awesome. Well, to everyone out there listening, this is the Psanctum Oddcast, Entheogens and God edition. I'm Tom Hatzis with co-counsel Keith Grevenitz and our good friend, I'm used to calling you Pod Damn It, but Sean Manseau, is that it?
Sean Manseau.
And our good friend Sean Manseau. And till next time, keep it wild, keep it weird, keep it safe. Peace.
See you guys.
Somebody